Hello, everyone. Brigantia Blackbird of Blackbird's Brew here. By now, I think everyone has had an opportunity to hear about that football player who had his heart stop while he was on the field last night. Damar Hamlin was his name, 24 years old. I didn't see the game myself, but I certainly caught the headlines this morning. I was hearing and reading what everyone had to say about that. 24 years old, cardiac arrest, heart stops. How about that? Now, that would be horrible under any circumstances, but it's even more disturbing when we realize that he is the latest in a growing number of examples of people who are quite young, extremely physically fit, who are suddenly having these issues, whether it's cardiac arrest or dying, having other consequences. It's happening. And it's getting very, very noticeable. And last night, that was national television. I don't think anyone who happened to witness that or hear that is going to be forgetting about it anytime soon. Now, what makes it worse is that everyone who's experiencing these misfortunes seems to have a few things in common. Namely, they got the pokey poke. Yeah. I don't know what we're allowed to say on YouTube these days, but we'll just say pokey poke. I think you guys know what I mean by that. Yeah, in this pokey poke, they were assured it was safe and effective, and if they had questions, doubts, or objections, or they just wanted to see more data, didn't matter because they were told it was safe and effective by people who were in a position of power and authority. And then you had the push from employers who were saying, yeah, if you're going to keep your job, you're going to have to get the old pokey poke. And now we have these things happening. Whether it's the footballer of last night or, the kid at the local high school team who's suddenly having massive health issues out of nowhere. Now, we've been told multiple times that there's no correlation and certainly no causation between these occurrences and the pokey poke. But I'm at the point, and I suspect many other people are as well, of show me the receipts. Because you see, there's a pattern. We are looking at a pattern here, and we have more examples every day. And this pattern did not exist before very, very recently. So when that occurs, you start looking at the pattern and you start looking for commonalities, and that's where you start your investigation and you start asking questions. Now, if you can eliminate that saying, no, there's another contributing factor here, or no, it's related, but there's also this going on, good. Demonstrate that, provide evidence, preferably a mountain of it, and I want to see it cross-referenced and examined and peer-reviewed and all of the other things that used to be perfectly normal in our society before all of the COVID stupidity. Prove to me that this was something else. But that's not really what I want to focus on today, even though we could go on for days on that. I really want to put forth the question of how did we get ourselves in this situation to begin with? No, and I mean that really seriously. I think it's time to really turn the mirror on ourselves and ask, how in the hell did we get here? Because, sure, there was a virus, but let's be real, that virus has a survival rate in excess of 99%. And we knew that as early as May 2020. Once it arrived on the US shores, then we had more reliable data than what we could get from the Chinese Communist government. I'm not exactly singing the praises of American institutions at the moment, but I think they have a slightly more honest reporting than the Chinese communists do. At least that's what I think most days. But the point is, we knew, and we knew that things were not going to be the worst case scenario that people had feared. We understood that. And it was after we understood that you started seeing the pushes for more lockdowns and more masks and gloves and face shields and all of this other stuff. And it was always vaccine or nothing. Never mind any possible treatments. We're not even going to ask those questions. We're just going to steamroller a vaccine and tell you that it's wonderful and that it's just going to solve all your problems. And no one's going to be allowed to question it or even give it a second thought. Now, there was a tremendous amount of pressure, and it came from politicians and the media, who was having an absolute heyday with this hysteria, much of which they created. And of course, we had medical elites like the Faucis of this world who were, declaring that the sky was falling and we all needed to do what they say. So I'm not going to pretend like there wasn't pressure and that some personalities are more prone to buckle underneath that kind of pressure. But that pressure alone was not enough to get us into this horrific situation in which we are learning the consequences of allowing ourselves to be used as test subjects. It wasn't just the pressure alone, and it certainly was not the fear of the virus alone. What really got us in trouble is that people en masse abandoned their power of reason, and they just abdicated any sense of personal responsibility that they needed to look at the evidence. They needed to believe what they could see and observe with their own eyes. They needed to be the ones in charge of making their own personal decisions, including the responsibility to reject it, whether it's an individual or an authority figure at work or an institution, from exercising improper influence, improper authority over them. That was everyone's responsibility to reject. And so many people failed that test in a myriad of ways. And people are doing their best to run away from this knowledge and to say it really wasn't them. But no, let's not start 2023 that way. Let's actually own this. Whatever mistakes we have made throughout the course of this, let's say, okay, I was wrong. I was wrong to surrender my agency in this fashion. I was wrong not to actively reject and defy all of this overreach. And I was wrong to, outsource decisions about what's best for my own medical care to someone else. Because we should be making those decisions for ourselves. Parents should be making those decisions for their children in a sensible, logical, rational, and loving fashion. That is the responsibility. And if people had seized that responsibility, we would not be experiencing these consequences. I guarantee you, we would not be seeing very young people having all of these health issues and also some of them just suddenly dying out of a blue sky. I do not think that we would be seeing that. And I defy anyone to try to convince me otherwise. So, this brings me to the real meat and potatoes of this live stream. It's the fact that if we had just kept to our folk wisdom, if we had looked to what our ancestors had handed down to us, their principles, a lot of this situation wouldn't have been created to start with, and it has the power to make it stop. I mean, why do you think that we see this ongoing renaissance of interest in things like the Havamal, the Celtic triads, Marcus Aurelius's meditations, just to name a particular few? But we have all kinds of pagan folk wisdom that we can draw upon. Why do you think we keep seeing a resurgence in that? I argue that this is really not a coincidence. All of this, our folk proverbs, our philosophy, all of the things that we've come to understand and that we've been able to rediscover in the past century, there's a reason why it has continued to exist. There's a reason why it has continued to be handed down. When you consider the amount of pagan knowledge that has just been wiped out of existence, that we're essentially having to rediscover, all the things that we don't even know that we lost, but we still have the common wisdom of our pagan peoples. That survived. That still exists. I think the gods went out of their way to make sure that it was still going to be there when we needed it most. And I would say, look at the state of the world. I think we do need it most right now. There's a reason why I've been going through things like the Havamal verse by verse and doing deep dives and really thinking about it. It's because these things can benefit us in a very real fashion. And I think this is one of the most powerful things that we as pagans can offer to the world, because it's about practical wisdom for living on earth, of calling a spade, understanding that you need to own your life. You need to take that on. You need to seize it with both hands and live it to the full until it is done. That is the obligation of a human being. That is the motivation for why you get married, why you have a family, why you look after your relatives, why you care about your friends, why you build a community, why you go out and why you even go out and build a career. This is the motivation. It's because this is what it means to be alive on earth. And in order to thrive, there have to be certain preconditions. And one of those preconditions is that you're not surrendering your free will towards people who don't care anything about you. And if we have not gotten that lesson through after the past couple of years, I really do not know what to tell people at this point. I don't know what they need to hear or see or experience to help them connect those dots because it is just so blatant. Now, of course, it isn't enough for us just to have our pagan wisdom at our disposal. There's all kinds of channels where they've done very dramatic readings of things like the Havamal, or they discuss it a little bit. But even if someone could recite every verse and say, this, that, and the other about it, we can't keep studying our lore as if we're trying to take a test on it. I mean, that's just not an effective thing for us to do. What we really desperately need is to completely internalize that, make that part of who we are and how we live our lives. That's when we know that it's finally sunk in. That's when we know we're actually practicing it, because it isn't about passing some kind of test or being able to demonstrate to other pagans that, oh, yes, I've read X, Y, and Z, and doesn't that, make me part of the club? That is not what it is. As much as we need to make a proper study of our surviving pagan lore and be actively adding knowledge to that, as much as that is, knowledge alone is not what helps us. This is either about who we really are, how we actually live our lives, or if it's just an affectation. Absent that, it is an affectation. And I think a lot of people during the whole COVID hysteria, they have realized that a lot of the things they claimed to believe in or that they thought were true, it was just a skin deep, surface level affectation. It wasn't actually real, because the first time they put to pressure, the first time they might have to possibly lose something to live in a manner in which they thought, they didn't fight for it. They just complied. And this is what comes of encouraging a society of, rights without responsibility, of saying that you can have actions without consequences, or that you could get rewards without sacrifice. We have neglected this vital element. I mean, we have people whose whole life goal is to avoid experiencing pain or discomfort. What kind of existence is that? It is incredibly debilitating. That's why we see the mental instability. This is why we see people having profound emotional, psychological, spiritual, even physical problems. It's because they are not taking on the burden of living. Now, how different it would be if our whole society was instead a pagan society, and then we had some kind of sickness and someone said, yeah, so we're not going to let you ask questions, we're not going to let you question anything, you're just going to have to do what you're told. Because a pagan society would be a society of people who understand that it's their responsibility, they need to make decisions, and they need to really consult with each other, that this isn't some kind of heavy-handed top-down thing that they're just going to hear and obey. And if you had that society, you would not have gotten the heavy handedness. You wouldn't have seen lockdowns. You wouldn't have seen, you must wear a mask or else. You would not have seen the medical profession perjure itself and censoring itself. You wouldn't have seen social media companies getting away with the absolute outrageous censorship that they have done. You would not see governmental powers using this as an excuse to expand their sphere of influence, of lording it over people more so, turning people into subjects, into serfs. You wouldn't have that. What you would have had is said, people, thanks for the information. I'm glad to know that there's some new kind of cooties going around. When you have actual information that a variety of different scientists have debated about, you let me know. Until then, I'm going to treat this the way I would treat any other illness. I'm going to take the same sensible precautions. I'm going to act with good sense. I'm going to see how things turn out, and I'm going to make appropriate adjustments as we go along. Thanks for letting me know there's something out there. I will take it from here. We didn't have that. People didn't take it from there. They just lined up and did what they were told, and now they are crying, and now they are sorry for experiencing the consequences of that really, really shitty decision. Just think, 24 years old. That's how old this guy is. And as the latest update I heard is he was still in the hospital. I'm not aware if he's woken up or if there's been an opportunity to assess his condition because your heart stops, blood flow stops going, the brain gets deprived. I mean, you don't know what condition he might wake up into. I mean, we don't. I hope he's okay. I really, really do. I don't wish this kind of misfortune on anybody, not even the people I really don't like, let alone someone I've never heard of before. But I'm just saying is that we don't know just how far reaching the consequences of this incident are really going to be. And again, he's 24 years old. I'm 41. I'm a few years shy of being old enough to properly be his mother. I keep thinking about the those who are just a couple of years ahead of me. How many people watched that happen on the field and they weren't just struck by the horror of what was happening to him, but they were also thinking about their own children, especially if they had them get the little pokey poke. How many of them had that nightmare saying, what if that's Junior? What if that's little Susie? What have I done? I was told that I was doing the right thing, but I didn't really stop and think. I wasn't listening to the counter argument. Have I done something and put my children in a position to where they are more vulnerable that this happens to them? We're having a crisis of the soul. And I think that we need to actually allow this crisis to shape us and allow this crisis to make us have our own internal reckoning of saying, you know what, maybe I really, really screwed up. Maybe I should have done more. Maybe I should have been more defiant. Maybe at the very least, I should have said, before we start forcing anyone to do anything, we need to have a hell of a lot more information and, a quick and dirty, not even fully completed test cycle, and you're starting to inject people with things. Maybe we don't do that. Maybe we say no. Maybe we think about what our ancestors would have done and we would have reacted a bit more rationally. Maybe we also would have considered that our ancestors, the practice of their faith was a daily thing, and they understood that as precious as life is, every incarnation does end. All things have their time. And some of us have shorter amounts of time on this earth than others. And we go back to the ancestors. And when we're with the gods on the other side, and we're waiting until the cycle begins again for us to take on the flesh in another form. There is some faith and there is some comfort in that kind of understanding, because you understand that death is not this horrible end of all things. It just means that you're no longer incorporated. It means that maybe you do take sensible risks and you make decisions saying, you know what, I'm comfortable with going this route. Maybe I'm not going to cling to life, in this frightened, absolutely hysterical way. And I shouldn't even say cling to life, clinging to existence. They would have said, we have to think about on what terms are we alive, because hidden away, isolated from other people, being told that we're not even in charge of our own bodies anymore. What kind of life is that? What kind of existence is that? What is it that you are sparing yourself from? What kind of benefit did you get by, shielding yourself away from a risk? And that's assuming that you did. Because now it seems that by trying to avoid one risk, people have invited a much bigger risk into their lives to absolute tragic consequence. And that's really the thought that I want to leave us with here today. Is the fact that when we act stupidly, there are always going to be consequences, and we cannot avoid those consequences unfolding. We are simply going to have to endure. Our task is to learn the proper lesson from them. And I hope this does inspire people to look back at pagan proverbs, pagan philosophy, pagan theology, and say, I'm not looking at this just through the eyes to know what it is or to have an intellectual understanding, but actually take that into your own soul and think about, okay, what does this mean when these ideas are actually put into practice in the waking world? How does that change things? I really think that is the place that we are desperately needing to get. And it's like the stream that I did the other day about that person on Fox News who was saying about how Viking culture could essentially save the West, which, I agree. And it's not just Viking culture. It would, what they call Viking culture, be Norse Germanic culture. But look at Celtic culture. Look at the wisdom handed down to us by the Greco-Romans. Whatever your background is, look to your ancestors and think about how they actually viewed the world and what terms they were willing to exist on. And think about what was it about them that led them to actually stand up to authority figures and say, no, you have limitations, and saying, no, you can be in charge of all of this, but there are things within my household sphere that I am in charge of, and it's not for you to meddle with. I think that's worth contemplating, and I hope that's what everyone takes away from this. Have any thoughts, or you want to continue on the conversation? Feel free to send me a message and hit me up on Gilded. Link in the description box below, as is the subscribe star, in case you would care to donate to this channel to gradually upgrade equipment, upgrade programs in order to create a better product for all of you. So, any further questions, thoughts, feelings, subscribe, like, leave a comment, let me know, share your own thoughts with me, because we've got to start taking this seriously. And every time people are talking about it publicly, that's sending a message to the powers that be that we are not so willing to submit to their pathetic little will as what they imagined. And we are going to be reasserting our own proper powers. So show your defiance. Show your defiance in the comments. But that'll do it for now. I will see you guys later. Bye-bye.